When I was let go from my position as CFO, I didn't think it was just the end of a career. I realized it was the beginning of a battle I never could have imagined. It wasn't the kind of shock that rattles your bones, it was more like a quiet punch to the gut, a reminder that nothing lasts forever, not even the things you've worked your whole life to build. Over the past 15 years, I helped turn Meridian Manufacturing from a small family-owned business in Cincinnati into a publicly traded powerhouse with 18 plants across the Midwest. Everything I did had a purpose. Every number I balanced had a reason. I had always believed that honesty in business was the cornerstone of success, and I proved that when we not only survived 2 recessions but thrived in ways most companies could only dream of. But everything changed when Travis Mercer arrived. The 36-year-old new CEO, with his designer suits and expensive sneakers, swept into the office like a whirlwind. I remember the first time he sat across from me in that cold, sterile conference room. He barely looked me in the eye, almost like I was some outdated relic, a vestige of the past that had outlived its usefulness. I clearly remember his words, "James, the company is entering a new era. We need someone who speaks the language of modern finance." His words felt like a knife to the chest, but I just sat there, nodding. I knew this wasn't just about a new generation taking over, it was something bigger. Travis wasn't the first CEO I'd worked with. Over the years, I had seen leaders come and go, but none like him. Travis didn't seem like a real leader, he felt like a product, polished and packaged, a walking symbol of change. The truth was, I didn't see any real change in him, just a lot of talk about innovation and disruption, but nothing that was grounded in the reality of the numbers I had spent my career perfecting. What I soon realized was that Travis wasn't the one pulling the strings. He was just the face of something much deeper and far more troubling. In the beginning, it seemed like things were shifting for the better, at least on the surface. But the more I observed, the more it became clear to me that something wasn't right. Travis talked a lot about creative finance and modernization, but his decisions lacked substance. They didn't seem to be grounded in the real, practical needs of the company. And that's when I noticed Zachary Hughes. The 29-year-old wunderkind with a TED Talk on financial innovation that had gone viral. He was brought in as Travis's right-hand man, the new face of cutting-edge finance. But the more I heard from Zachary, the more I realized he wasn't someone who understood the complexities of running a manufacturing company. To him, everything was theoretical, and none of it had anything to do with the gritty reality of the work we were doing every day. Zachary wasn't the only problem, though. As I watched Travis and Zachary work together, it became apparent to me that they weren't just pushing out old systems, they were slowly pushing out everyone who had been part of the company's heart and soul. One by one, they replaced my team with people from their own circles, those who didn't understand the value of the systems we had in place but were loyal to their vision of a new company. One morning, as I sat at my desk, reviewing the latest financial reports, I noticed something off. It was subtle at first, just small discrepancies, little things that didn't seem to add up. A few unusually large invoices. Consulting contracts that seemed unnecessary. And payments to vendors I couldn't track down. At first, I thought it was just a glitch, a minor mistake in the system. But then I saw it again. And again. That's when the sinking feeling hit me. This wasn't just a coincidence. Something bigger was happening here. I didn't jump to conclusions. I wasn't the type to act on impulse. But I couldn't ignore what I was seeing. I wasn't just losing my job, I was watching something more dangerous unfold in front of me, a financial scheme that I couldn't yet fully understand, but I knew it was growing by the day. The question was, what was I going to do about it? And more importantly, who was behind it? At that moment, I realized that I wasn't just dealing with a corporate shakeup. I was up against something far darker. And it was time for me to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went before it swallowed the company whole. Travis wasted no time making his mark on the company. It was like watching a storm tear through a calm sea. Within weeks, my team was slowly replaced by his people, young, eager, and enthusiastic about innovation, but with little understanding of the deep-rooted systems we had put in place. The shift was jarring. Gone were the experienced individuals who had weathered the highs and lows with me. In their place were fresh faces, each one more interested in fitting into Travis's vision than understanding the core values that had sustained Meridian for so long. Travis's message was clear: he didn't trust the old guard. He didn't trust me. And I could see it in every decision he made, every change he pushed through without consulting me. "We're moving into the future," he would say, "and we need people who understand the language of modern finance." He didn't even try to hide his disdain for the way we had done things. To him, my methods that had brought us this far were nothing more than relics of a past that no longer fit his idea of progress. One afternoon, during a meeting with the board, Travis delivered a line that still echoes in my mind: "James, we need someone who understands modern finance. Someone who speaks the language of the future." His words cut through the room like a knife. There was no sugarcoating it. He was replacing me. But instead of fighting it, I simply nodded. I didn't have the energy for confrontation, and I knew that pushing back wouldn't change anything. So, I kept quiet. I focused on the work that needed to be done, pretending like nothing was changing, while I silently watched the foundation I had built start to crumble. The next few days felt like I was drifting in a fog. There was no more room for the work I had done. The company I had spent 15 years building was slipping away from me, and Travis was the one driving it off course. But the hardest part wasn't losing my job, it was seeing how my departure affected those who had stood by me all these years. Bethany Turner, my longest-serving accounting assistant, was one of the hardest hits. I caught her standing by the elevator one afternoon, tears barely held back. She had been with me from the beginning, and now, she was just another casualty of the corporate shakeup. "James," she said softly, her voice trembling, "I'm really going to miss you." I smiled faintly and placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's part of the cycle, Bethany," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though inside I was crumbling. "Change happens. But it's all part of the process." She didn't say much more, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. As I packed up my things that afternoon, I saw her one last time in my office doorway, holding out a small envelope. "It's from the team," she said quietly. It was a farewell gift, one last gesture of kindness from the people who had believed in the work we did. I thanked her, but as I looked at the envelope, I couldn't help but feel a deep ache in my chest. This wasn't just the end of my career at Meridian, it was the end of an era. As I walked out the door for the last time, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much darker. I had seen the cracks in the foundation, but now, they were becoming chasms. And I was beginning to realize that I might be the only one who could stop it from falling apart completely. As I began to prepare for my exit from Meridian, something inside me refused to let go of the nagging feeling that all was not right. I had always prided myself on keeping the company's finances spotless, and I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers without at least understanding what had gone wrong. While packing up my office, I couldn't shake the feeling that the changes happening around me weren't just about fresh faces and a new direction. They were something darker. I started noticing discrepancies in the financial records, things that didn't add up, things that shouldn't have been overlooked. Small irregularities at first, an overinflated consulting fee here, an unexplained vendor payment there. But the deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became. Payments were being made to shell companies, fake vendors that didn't exist in the real world. I traced one of these payments to a company named Alpine Innovations, which sounded more like a front than a legitimate business. A new supplier, an oddly placed invoice, and suddenly, millions of dollars were gone, funneled through these non-existent services. Whoever was behind this was making sure the paper trail was nearly impossible to follow. But it wasn't just the transactions that unsettled me. It was the feeling that I was being watched. The thought that someone else might be aware of what I was uncovering sent a cold shiver down my spine. That's when I found the letter. It was buried in a drawer under some old files, almost as if it had been placed there intentionally for me to find. The envelope was unmarked, the paper cheap. I opened it carefully, and inside was a single line: "Watch out, they're watching you. Don't go too far." I froze. My pulse quickened. It was short, cryptic, and yet it carried an unmistakable weight of truth. Who had sent this? How did they know what I was investigating? Was there someone in the company who had caught wind of my suspicions and was trying to warn me, or was this a threat to keep me silent? I couldn't ignore it. The letter, along with the financial anomalies, felt like the universe screaming that I was on the edge of something far bigger than I had realized. I had to get to the bottom of it, even if it meant digging into places I wasn't sure I was ready to uncover. The stakes were higher than I had ever imagined, and it was clear now, I was in the middle of something that could destroy everything I had worked for. The deeper I dug, the more unsettling the picture became. The payments to Alpine Innovations weren't just an isolated mistake, they were a part of something much larger. As I began tracing the financial trail, I realized that Alpine Innovations wasn't a legitimate company at all. In fact, it didn't seem to exist outside of a few scattered documents and accounts. I found no physical address, no staff, just a web of digital transactions funneled from our company into this ghost entity. It was a shell company, a front, specifically designed to siphon money from Meridian, and it was all happening under the radar. The more I investigated, the clearer it became, Travis and Zachary weren't just ambitious executives pushing a new vision. They were orchestrating something far darker. I began to connect the dots between Alpine Innovations and other mysterious transactions, consulting fees that seemed to appear out of nowhere, overpaid contracts, and non-existent services. It was a sophisticated scheme, one that could easily slip under the radar of any external audit. But it wasn't just about these two men. No, there was someone else pulling the strings, someone who had been operating in the background the entire time. And then, the call came. I had been sitting at my kitchen table, reviewing the latest batch of documents, when my phone rang. The number was blocked, but something inside me told me to pick up. James, the voice on the other end said, low and guarded. It's Kevin. I need to tell you something, but you have to listen carefully. Kevin had worked in internal audit for years, and while he wasn't exactly a whistleblower, I knew he was someone I could trust. His voice was shaky, as though he had just come to a horrible realization himself. Travis isn't the one you should be focusing on, Kevin continued. It's William. He's the one behind all of this. He's been orchestrating everything from the start. I sat up straighter, my heart pounding. William Foster. The chairman of the board. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Kevin explained, his voice barely audible. William brought Travis in. He's been setting this whole thing up for months. He needed someone like Travis, someone with a shiny, modern image, to distract everyone while he worked behind the scenes, slowly draining the company dry. I was stunned. William had always seemed like a steady, reliable presence in the company. But now, it seemed like he had been playing a much darker game than I had ever imagined. Kevin continued, William is the one pulling the strings. Travis and Zachary, they're just his pawns. They're executing his plan to siphon money from Meridian. The board has no idea, but William's been making moves for years to position himself for this. My mind raced. Everything started to make sense, the strange decisions, the sudden shift in direction, the unexplained financial anomalies. But how had William managed to keep his involvement hidden for so long? How had I not seen it? I felt a chill run down my spine. The man I had trusted, the one who had hired me all those years ago, was now the one I had to stop. It wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about exposing a network of deceit that stretched far beyond Travis and Zachary. William Foster was the mastermind, and I had to find a way to take him down before it was too late. With the truth about William slowly unraveling, I knew I couldn't let the opportunity slip away. The board members who hadn't yet fallen under William's influence were the only hope I had left. But I couldn't afford to waste any time. Every second felt like a countdown. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how dangerous this had become, not just for me, but for everyone who had believed in the company we had built. I first reached out to Elaine Morrison, one of the few board members who had been with Meridian long enough to understand the company's values. She had always been quiet, but I could tell she had integrity. The moment we spoke, I could hear the doubt in her voice. She hadn't realized the extent of the corruption, but she was willing to listen. "I've seen things in the books that don't add up," she confessed. But I didn't want to believe it. Not from William. I pushed forward, explaining the connections I'd uncovered, the money funneled through Alpine Innovations, and the false vendors. But the moment I mentioned William's involvement, she fell silent. It wasn't just disbelief, it was fear. "I can't get involved," she said, her voice trembling. "He's too powerful." I had to keep going, though. I couldn't stop now. Kevin was the next person I tried to reach. After the unsettling conversation we'd had, I knew he had seen the cracks in the company too. But when I tried to contact him, he didn't pick up. A few hours later, I learned he'd been quietly reassigned to a different position, far away from anything that could give him access to important files. It was clear now, William had been one step ahead of me the entire time. I knew then that I couldn't rely on anyone within the company for help. I had to take matters into my own hands. Before I made my next move, I set up a secure emergency account in the company's audit system. A simple fail-safe. I made sure that every piece of evidence I had collected, every financial discrepancy, every shady transaction, was backed up and stored safely in case anything went wrong. If they discovered what I was doing, I needed to have proof, something solid that couldn't be erased or tampered with. The clock was ticking. The pieces were falling into place, but every step forward only made me feel more exposed. What was I going to do next? And who could I trust when the people closest to me were being silenced? The days following my decision to take action were a blur of adrenaline and uncertainty. I had already gathered everything I needed, the proof, the documents, the trail that connected William to the scandal. But I knew this wasn't something I could do alone. The risk was too great. I needed allies, but the only ones left were those who had somehow managed to avoid being corrupted by the machine William had built. And they weren't easy to find. The first step was reaching out to the remaining members of the board whom I trusted. Elaine had hesitated, but after I sent her the emails outlining everything I'd discovered, she seemed to grasp the enormity of what was happening. Her response was as reluctant as it was direct: "I'll help you, James. But you have to know, there's no turning back from this." Bethany, too, had her role to play. I had kept her informed in the background, giving her the information she needed to file an anonymous whistleblower complaint to internal audit. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get the ball rolling. I knew it would be risky for her, she was already being squeezed out of her position, but I also knew she wouldn't stand by while the company she had worked for all those years was torn apart by greed. Within days, the information I had sent out started gaining traction. The investigation that followed was swift and relentless. Meridian's board had no choice but to open an official inquiry. The evidence was too clear to ignore. As the days turned into weeks, the ugly truths began to surface. Travis's reckless spending, Zachary's dubious financial practices, and William's masterminding of it all came to light in excruciating detail. I watched from the sidelines as the company I had helped build was pulled into chaos. The headlines were brutal: Meridian Manufacturing under investigation for fraud. Executives, including Travis and Zachary, were suspended pending further investigations. The financial crisis that followed was inevitable. Meridian, once a symbol of strength and stability, was teetering on the edge of collapse. The damage was already done, and no amount of public relations could hide the rot at its core. I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. The truth had come to light, and the people responsible were facing the consequences. But as I sat at my desk, watching the company unravel, a part of me couldn't help but mourn what was lost. The company that had been my life for 15 years was no longer what it used to be. It had been poisoned from the inside, and now it was too late to save it. I made my decision then. I wasn't going back. There was nothing left for me at Meridian. I packed up my things and left Cincinnati behind, headed to Asheville, North Carolina, where I had always dreamed of starting over. The small cabin I had bought by the Blue Ridge Mountains became my sanctuary. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a room for my office, but the view was everything I needed. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I spent my days working on smaller projects, helping local nonprofits with their finances, focusing on the things that really mattered. The stress of the corporate world, the politics, the constant battles, it all seemed so distant now. I found a peace I hadn't realized I was missing. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't the fast-paced life I had once known, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, it felt right. The investigation at Meridian eventually led to federal charges against William and the others involved. Their actions had caught up with them. But for me, the battle was over. I had done what I needed to do, expose the truth. As I sat on my porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the mountains, I thought about the years I had spent fighting for something that ultimately fell apart. But I also thought about the lesson I had learned. In the end, the truth always has a way of finding its way to the surface, no matter how deeply it's buried. And sometimes, it's better to walk away from the fight than to keep fighting a war that's already been lost. Meridian paid the price for its corruption, but I had found something more valuable, peace. And that was enough. As I sit here, watching the evening sky fade into shades of purple and orange, I can't help but wonder, what would you have done? If you were in my shoes, when you discovered such a deep, calculating conspiracy at the heart of an organization you dedicated your life to, could you have faced it without losing yourself? Could you have exposed the truth without sacrificing everything you believed in? It's easy to think that standing up to corruption is the right choice, but when you're up against something this big, this insidious, it's not just your job on the line, it's your reputation, your sanity, and sometimes even your soul. I was lucky. I found the strength to keep going, to make sure the truth was heard, even when it seemed like the entire system was stacked against me. But I know the cost. I lost friends, I lost the company I had built, and I came close to losing myself in the process. So, if you were in my place, could you hold on to what matters, or would you be swept away by the tide of corporate greed and ambition? These are the questions I ask myself as I start a new chapter, far from the chaos. And perhaps, they're questions we all need to consider when we're faced with injustice in our own lives. If you've enjoyed this story, if it's made you think about the price of integrity and the power of truth, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this, stories of courage, honesty, and standing up for what's right. After all, we could all use a little more inspiration in the world today.